Moving on with priority area 3, where we are talking about helping firms and people deal with residual risks and natural disasters. Let's look at some ideas on taking action in terms of sample targets and indicators. Daily weather forecasts are produced by the Hydromet Agency, and an easy to communicate alert system is in place. This is kind of a target, which is happening more and more in countries like China and India, for example, and India also disseminates these forecasts to some of the neighboring countries. Never mind the social geopolitical tensions. Communication channels are in place to efficiently communicate early warnings to populations and emergency services. So there are two examples from India this season. For example, Biporjoy, which had lots of early warnings and action on the ground in terms of disaster management, because this is a big cyclone that's coming at you. And then there were heat waves in Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, and all people were exposed to the heat wave and 100 people died. So you have warnings on heat waves out, but at that local scale, unlike a cyclone, you don't have somebody in charge of making sure that all people are not put out in the way of a heat wave. Okay, so communication channels are one thing, but last mile issues are another thing. Average error in early warning, both missed events and false alarms. So we have to be aware of generally what happens. IMD forecasts are argued to be shifted by a day in terms of heavy rainfall over the city of Mumbai, for example. How do we know that? Parents who are told school is closed because heavy rain is coming today end up dealing with childcare issues, and it turns out that the heavy rain comes a day later, and then it creates other problems. So we need to know the errors and biases. Share of population with access to early warning systems or covered by evacuation plans has to be an indicator, that target that has to be filled up. Average distance to closest shelter, this information has to be made available and accessed, made sure it is communicated. Capacity of shelters or emergency services, for example, number of emergency medical service units and trained health emergency professionals. This comes under the so-called S2S, sub-seasonal to seasonal forecast, which has this ready, set, go framework, where longer term forecasts, let's say you have short, medium and extended range forecasts to deal with heat waves or extreme rainfall events. So 1 to 3 days, 3 to 10 days, and weeks 2 to 4. If week 2 to 4 forecast says there is a chance of a heat wave in a particular region, knowing its accuracy, you need to prepare the resources like shelters, emergency services, etc., hydration centers and so on, moving elderly people to those shelters, etc. The medium range of 3 to 10 days brings you closer in terms of confidence in the forecast and the specific location, so you prepare those regions with the go, ready, set, go, set step. Then go step happens when day 1 to 3 forecast says for sure that this particular village of district of Balia in Uttar Pradesh is getting hit with heat waves, so that 100 elderly people are not exposed to a heat wave. Okay, excuse me, I got a frog in my throat. Okay, duration communities can operate safely and independently, for example, water and food shortage and medical supplies. If a particular region gets stranded by floods or some other emergency, then these are very critical targets and indicators. Number of disaster drills performed per year. People do tend to get lazy. For example, in the regions of Oklahoma, when there is a tornado alert, people do exactly what they are supposed to do because there are drills in schools and elsewhere. Otherwise, lives are lost. So these are very important as well. Continuing with sample targets and indicators, overall strategy to manage residual risks and disaster is prepared and approved. So it's in place. Coordination mechanisms between the various preparedness actors are in place. For example, ministries or agencies for crisis management, social protection, food security and agriculture, as well as finance. Fraction of the population covered by at least one financial instrument to cope with the shocks, for example, insurance, social protection, or access to emergency borrowing. So you may have people rich enough to buy insurance, those who are not, and they need some kind of a welfare or social protection for residual risks, natural disasters, or once damaged, there is access to emergency borrowing to build back the shelter, the roof, whatever, kitchen, and so on, toilets, right? So this is the risk finance strategies for households and governments from this paper here. Instruments targeting households are in black. Instruments for governments or local authorities are in red. So we are going here from poorer households to richer households in terms of income, and we are going from smaller events to more intense events in terms of natural disasters. So you have revenue diversification happening over this scale. So social protection and remittances have to depend on the income for smaller events. So government reserve funds exist, and government insurance and contingent finance is in place, and international aid may become very necessary, like the big earthquake in Turkey, for example, which will take decades to rebuild. And there are governance issues there as well in terms of money, international aid being siphoned off by intermediaries or even the decision makers in the process. So this has to go up as more intense events occur for rich and poor people. So you have a minimum here, and then increases in terms of financial inclusions, in terms of savings and credits, and market insurance reaching international aid at some scale of intensity of events and household incomes. These are schematics, but you get the idea that these have to be codified into making sure there are reserve funds and government insurance and contingent finance is in place, and international aid can be received because the governance structure is seen as a reliable acceptor of such aid, because if you throw it into some countries, often it is seen as a loss, because people will just eat it up. Okay, so here, continuing with some of the sample targets and indicators, share of population with disaster insurance has to be known. Share of population with access to emergency loans from financial institutions have to be targeted, and indicators should be there for quantifying it. Share of population receiving remittances should be tracked. Share of population with financial savings in a bank account. That has very important implications during disasters and dealing with residual risks. Continuing the idea of insurance, index-based insurance refers to products for which payments are not based on observed losses. So it's not just that your house got damaged so you get paid so much. It's based on some index. Instead, they are based on when a physical variable, for example, rainfall deficit, wind speed, or area-based yield or another index exceeds predetermined threshold, regardless of the existence of loss. So think of a farmer with a certain crop, certain cash yield expectations and income expectations, and rainfall deficit, wind speeds, and area-based yields have to be tracked to compensate for potential losses, even if the loss hasn't actually occurred. For example, a farmer will receive a predefined insurance payment if rainfall falls below a minimum threshold over a 1-month period. Index-based insurance schemes have major advantages over traditional contracts, including reduced transaction costs because losses do not need to be measured, and a lot of cheating can happen here. Monitoring will be required. Ground forces will be required to go verify reported losses and so on, which can be eliminated for index-based insurances. Encouraging individuals to still take preventive measures because the payout does not depend on losses or actions taken to reduce risks. In other words, reducing moral hazard. Okay, this is critical. So you will know you will get some payment, but you have a benefit in taking preventive actions to reduce your losses anyway, because that will just increase your income, right? You cannot sit back and saying I'm getting a payment, and that will end up reducing your overall income. So there's a moral hazard involved there as well. Simple and objective payment decisions which make it easier to enforce contracts. Okay. Maybe I will stop this here and complete the section in the next podcast, but we are still talking about various options, tools, targets, indicators to deal with the issue of helping people and firms deal with residual risks and natural disasters. Okay, we'll come back and conclude this section in the next podcast.